Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerd Church. It is Tuesday, August 25th, and Dolly Parton is in heaven, and we are here. Um, it's been a day. I've been sick, my family is sick, which means that I've spent most of the day going through a large number of Joe Schmidt videos so that I can be ready to meet with a friend of his on Thursday to talk about his heel turn, reconversion, conversion, whatever it is you want to call it. But today, because my daughter's sick, I have a little bit more time. So I want to continue walking through the supernatural norms. And because I'm going to be spending the rest of my time on Tuesdays talking about for the next couple of weeks talking about Marian apparitions because Marian apparitions are a hot topic in the Catholic Church right now, specifically because, well, frankly, people like Joe Schmidt are using appeals to the miraculous and especially Marian apparitions to justify their faith in Catholicism, which is something that is not necessarily being supported by the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. And this, I believe, is one of the things that is creating a distinct separation between what we might call traditional Catholicism and what we might call the Catholic Church. But in order to build that case and to get into it, I need to really get into how the hierarchy of the Catholic Church is thinking about these issues of the supernatural. And as the title for this live stream goes, normalizing the supernatural. So taking events that happen and incorporating them into the Catholic Church in a way that supports rather than undercuts the direction that the hierarchy wants the church to move in. So I hope you will indulge me as I guide you through this document and point out the things about it that are important in the current discourse, keeping in mind that this change to the procedure for discerning supernatural norms is really something that happened just in 2024. And I think it's also notable that these norms were published. And they were published as soon as the as soon as they came into use, which is another important difference, is that now the Vatican is trying really hard to be transparent and making sure that ordinary lay people really understand the process. So let's again, I want to highlight this paragraph. I think I mentioned it last time, but I'm going to bring it up again just because I think it really matters. When considering such events, one should not overlook, for example, the possibility of doctrinal errors, which again, that's an issue with Akita, that's an issue with Medjugorje, or an oversimplification of the gospel message or the spread of a sectarian mentality. which again, that sectarian mentality is crucial because one of the things that Marian apocalypticism, and particularly those apocalyptic visions that are alleged to have come from the Virgin Mary, that talk about a great apostasy. Now, this isn't the LDS great apostasy, and yes, I am going to make a video explaining the difference between the LDS concept of the great apostasy and the Catholic concept of the great apostasy. But a lot of but one of the things that you'll see floating around in traditional Catholicism is the idea that there's going to be an what they call an ape of the church, or a false church, or a falling away that's going to happen, and where the entire Catholic Church, except for some tiny remnant, falls into apostasy. Now, the possibility that the SSPX or traditional Catholicism or Sedevacantism might represent the false church is not a concern that matters to traditional Catholics. But one of the things that they like to attack about the Catholic Church is the way that ecumenicism has been a hallmark of the Catholic Church, and really trying to engage in dialogue and take into account insights from critical scholarship and from other religions. This, for example, is one of the reasons why Amy Jill Levine is currently head of the Catholic Biblical Association of America. And most Catholics, when they hear about it, well, they might think it's a little bit strange because she is Jewish, and why, but not in the sense of she doesn't belong here, but more in the sense of why would a Jewish scholar want to be a member of the Catholic Biblical Association? Like it strikes some people as a little bit incongruous. I mean, it's struck Dr. Levine as a little bit incongruous. But when people hear who she is and what she's done and why she does it, everybody's like, oh, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I should check out some of her books. The traditional Catholics are going absolutely off the rails because she's Jewish and they don't want to talk to anybody that disagrees with them about anything. And so one of the things that they like to pull out of Marian apparitions is the idea that the church is falling into a state of apostasy. And that's what the mention, and that's why they're highlighting sectarian views as a potentially problematic thing. And then, of course, there's the possibility of believers being misled. I'm quoting again, by an event that is attributed to a divine initiative, but is merely the product of someone's imagination, a desire for novelty, a tendency to fabricate falsehoods, mythomania, or inclination towards lying. Which, again, those are things that, the possibility that this is a grift is always something that has to be considered, because frankly, being a pilgrimage site is something that is generally a boon to the local economy. And that's also not something that's going to be immediately evident. So these are the things that the Vatican thinks that needs to be looked out for. So let's continue down. Now we've got to the recent revision. All right, I read through that last time. Okay. So the reasons for the new norms. And I went through that I went through that in the last episode, where it was talking about how very often the where very often the bishops would say, okay, this happened, and they would urge everyone in their diocese to accept that, which creates a situation in which which creates a situation that's problematic from the point of view of the Vatican, from the point of view of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, because they don't want to set up a situation where somebody's ability to be Catholic is essentially a referendum on whether or not they can accept, say, the apparition at Lourdes. And very often, people will let that be a deal breaker for them. And so that's part of the reason why there's a desire to not even issue firm statements about whether or not something is supernatural, because it keeps the bishops in check a little bit. Um, so let's continue. Um, Despite this clear stance, the actual procedures followed by the dicastery, even in recent times, were still inclined towards the bishop making a declaration that the event was supernatural. And again, when they're using supernatural, they're using that as in the very specific sense of an actual intervention from God, from a saint. Not supernatural doesn't exclude the possibility that there is some non-natural phenomena going on. Not supernatural can also include, we think it was a demon. And if you were here for my live stream where I was talking about Our Lady of Akita, for example, one of the people that the bishop sent to investigate the case didn't think that it was supernatural, but rather than proposing an alternative naturalistic explanation, instead, he was saying, you know, I think it was probably ectoplasm. I think that somehow Sister Agnes was causing these mysterious liquids to manifest, which is kind of an interesting take, but nonetheless, that was his suggestion. So let's continue. So much so that some bishops insisted on being able to make a positive declaration of this type. Even recently, some bishops have wanted to make statements such as, I confirm the absolute truth of the facts, and the faithful must undoubtedly consider as true. These expressions effectively oriented the faithful to think they had to believe in the phenomena, which were sometimes valued more than the gospel itself, which was what I had just gone over. And this premature declaration thing is something that was a major issue with Our Lady of Nations apparition that took place in the Netherlands, where initially the bishop declared it supernatural. And yes, I am going to be talking about Our Lady of Nations probably next week. Because or certainly the week after, because Our Lady of Nations was an apparition that took place in the Netherlands shortly after World War II. And Our Lady of Nations essentially um, got weird and culty like a few years in, but people will still point to the initial positive declaration as evidence that Our Lady of Nations is a valued and valuable Marian apparition. And again, Our Lady of Nations and therefore Our Lady of Akita are tied to the push to grant Mary the title co-redemptrix, which is another thing that the Vatican has been trying to shut down in the last year. And notably was something that created issues with traditional Catholics, many of whom were pushing really, really hard for Our Lady of for co-redemptrix as a title. So as you can see, all of this fits together in really complicated ways that don't make a lot of sense until you start putting the murder board together, so to speak. Um, so let's continue. Um, in dealing with such cases, especially when preparing an official statement, some bishops sought the necessary prior authorization from the dicastery. Then, when granted that permission, bishops were asked not to mention the dicastery in their statement, which again was something that happened with Our Lady of Akita, where the bishop, after having been given, having initially gotten a "we don't think this is supernatural" declaration, then on his own authority authorized devotion within his diocese, which is something now that the Archbishop of Tokyo has tried to roll back. So again, and he says that he had gotten verbal authorization, that the he had gotten initial verbal authorization from the DDF under then Cardinal Ratzinger, the future Pope Benedict, to approve in his diocese. So you can see how this lack of clarity, to choose a word that's popular with a lot of traditional Catholics, was something that just made the whole situation messy and was one of the main reasons why we have these new norms. So, this was the case, for example, in the rare incidents that concluded in recent decades in which the dicastery included such provisions as Sam Impelere Note Congregation, or the dicastery shall not be involved in such a pronouncement, regarding a request of the Bishop of Gikongoro in Rwanda. That was Marian apparition that took place um, in the 1980s or 1990s. I don't remember the precise dates. That was the Our Lady of Kibeo apparition that happened prior to the Rwandan genocide. And in the opinion of some of the people who believe in it, basically prophesied the Rwandan genocide. Again, that's another Marian apparition that we'll be talking about. Now, um, let's continue. In these situations, the bishop could not even mention the dicastery had given its approval. Meanwhile, other bishops whose dioceses were also affected by such phenomena were also seeking an authoritative opinion on the dicastery to gain greater clarity. So again, part of this is paperwork. Part of this is just administrative stuff because again, the Catholic Church is also a really huge bureaucracy. And it's a thing where there's clear lines of communication that need to stay open. So let's continue. So, this way of proceeding, which has caused considerable confusion, shows how the 1978 norms are no longer adequate to guide the actions of the bishop in the dicastery. This has become even more of a problem today since phenomena rarely remain within the boundaries of one city or diocese. In other words, this is partly a this is partly a problem created by social media and the internet, because now instead of things starting small and word staying confined to one village, with the growth of mass media, something can become hugely publicized within a very short time. And then all of a sudden, everybody's rushing around to find out, as the poet said, if you had a vision or I had a vision to find out eternity. Okay. This concern was already noted during the 1974 plenary assembly of the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, where the members acknowledged that an event of alleged supernatural origin could inevitably extends beyond the limits of the diocese and even of a nation. The case automatically reaches the proportions that can justify intervention by the supreme authority of the church. And, for example, the Our Lady of Fatima apparition is another good example of that. Actually, I think that next week I'll probably do Fatima, because and Fatima may take a couple of weeks because Fatima is kind of the big one. Because by the time the third apparition happened, there were pilgrims coming in from all over the world to witness the alleged miracle of the sun. I say alleged because there is a great deal of controversy surrounding what happened and if something happened. But we'll get into that later. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Meanwhile, the 1978 norms recognized that it had become more difficult, if not almost impossible, to achieve with the required speed the judgments that in the past conclude the investigation of such matters. The expectation of receiving a declaration about the supernatural nature of an event resulted in very few cases ever reaching a clear determination. In fact, since 1950, no more than 6 cases have been officially resolved, even though such phenomena has often increased without clear guidance and with the involvement of people from many dioceses. Therefore, one can assume that many other cases were either handled differently or just not handled at all. To prevent further delays in the resolution of a specific case involving an event of alleged supernatural origin, the dicastery recently proposed to the Holy Father, this would be Pope Francis, the idea of concluding the discernment process not with a declaration of supernatural, but with a nil obstat, which would allow the bishop to draw pastoral benefit from the spiritual phenomena. The idea of concluding with the declaration of nil obstat, and again, nil obstat is just saying that there is nothing about believing in, that there is no barrier to believing in it, that there is nothing in that event that is considered to be a danger to the faith or the morals of ordinary Catholics, which is a much lower bar than accepting something is or is not supernatural. It's just saying, yeah, if you want to believe that, shine on, you crazy diamond. It probably won't hurt you. Because again, that leaves the potential to come in and shut it down later. The the idea of concluding with a declaration of nil obstat was reached after assessing the various and spiritual and pastoral fruits of the events and finding no substantial negative element in it. The Holy Father considered this proposal to be a right solution. Oh, I should also. Oh, wow, there are 4 people watching the stream. Hi. I'm always excited when people take time out of their day to come and hang out. Um, also, I would like to mention that I that currently the channel is sitting at 99 subscribers. So if you haven't liked, shared, and subscribed to the channel, this would be a great time to do that. Let's push us into triple digits. That would be cool. All right, so new aspects. So now we are back to our document and we are talking about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So, based on the factors mentioned above, with the new norms, we are proposing a procedure that is different from the past, but also richer, as it involves 6 possible prudential conclusions that can guide pastoral work surrounding events of alleged supernatural origin. These 6 possible determinations allow the dicastery and the bishops to handle in a suitable manner the issues that arise in connection with the diverse cases they encounter. As a rule, these potential conclusions do not include the possibility of declaring that the phenomena under discernment is of supernatural origin. That is, affirming with moral certainty that it originates from a decision willed by God in a direct way. Instead, as Pope Benedict XVI explained, and again, we're name checking Benedict. This is because Pope Benedict, in addition to being Pope, was head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. So he's the guy who used to have Cardinal Fernandez's job. And he is generally considered to be one of the most brilliant theologians, Catholic theologians of the 20th century. He was also someone who was seen as being theologically conservative and socially conservative and liturgically conservative. If traditional Catholics have one pope they like, it's going to be Benedict. So, in name checking Benedict, this is partly this is just Cardinal Fernandez showing his work. It's also pointing out that this isn't some kind of strange modernist plot. This is the Catholic Church doing what the Catholic Church does. Unless, of course, you're somebody who considers Pope Benedict a modernist, in which case, I don't know what to say. Um, so, um, okay, so instead, as Pope Benedict XVI explained, granting a nil obstat simply indicates that the faithful are authorized to give the phenomena their adhesion in a prudent manner. Since a nil obstat does not declare the events in question to be supernatural, it becomes even more apparent, as Pope Benedict XVI also said, how the phenomena is only a help which is proffered, but its use is not obligatory. Oh, that would have been the alarm that would have pulled me away. But today, this is the house of sickness. So we're going to make lemons from the lemonade and use this to work as far through this document as I possibly can. So let's continue. Um, and this is and this idea of miracles as being a help, of Marian apparitions, of supernatural events being a help to faith, but not the whole thing. They're the icing, they're the whipped cream, they're the sprinkles, they're not the cake, right? Jesus is the cake in this metaphor. Um, and that is really crucial to understanding how the Catholic Church encourages people to think about these miracles and how really your average lay Catholic sitting in the pews thinks about these miracles, which is why a lot of Catholics will think, which is why a lot of Catholics, we will have a, favorite Marian apparition or a favorite miracle that we just kind of believe. And maybe we believe it the way that a third grader is still clinging on to their belief in Santa Claus, but we're also believing it in a way that a third grader will eventually understand that Santa Claus is a way to get people to understand that it's good to give without getting the credit for it or getting any benefit for it. And, plus sometimes it's just fun to tell fun stories. That is the view that's being encouraged by the hierarchy, by the Catholic Church. And it means that the way that, traditional and traditionally minded Catholics will cling on to miracles is in some ways problematic. And it's also why a lot of traditional Catholics really don't like this document, because they think that it downplays the importance of miracles, because it does. Oh, the Lecantus Institute has subscribed. We are now at 100 subscribers. Woohoo! Yay! Thank you, Lecantus Institute. And I hope that as one of the premier okay, the Lecantus Institute does not yet exist, but it is a organization that is forming, based in Germany, actually, that has some very interesting, let's say, takes on issues that are of interest to traditional Catholics. And it will be interested to see if the Lecantus Institute makes a further appearance, makes further appearances on the channel. Oh, thank you, subscribers. We are at 100. So now this is our 100th subscriber show, apparently. Or maybe Thursday will be our celebration. I don't know. All right. So back to our text. At the same time, this response naturally leaves open the possibility, in monitoring how the devotion develops, a different response may be required in the future, which was something I mentioned previously. Moreover, it should be noted that reaching a declaration of supernaturalness of an event by its very nature not only requires a suitable amount of time to carry out the analysis, but it can also lead to the possibility that a judgment of supernatural today might become a judgment of not supernatural years later, and precisely this has happened. An example worth recalling is a case involving alleged apparitions from the 1950s. In 1956, the bishop issued a final judgment of not supernatural, and the following year, the Holy Office approved the bishop's decision. Then the approval of that veneration was sought again. In 1974, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith declared the alleged apparitions to be constant de non supernaturale, that is, supernatural talte, so not of supernatural origin. Thereafter, in 1996, the local bishop positively recognized the devotion, and in 2002, another bishop from the same place recognized the supernatural origin of the apparitions, leading to the spread of the devotion in other countries. Finally, in 2020, at the request of the congregation, a new bishop reiterated the congregation's earlier negative judgment, requiring the cessation of any published disclosures regarding the apparitions and revelations. It took about 70 excruciating years to bring the whole matter to a conclusion. And yes, I will be doing the legwork and talking about which specific apparition this one referred to, because this is definitely one of those if you know issues. I am not up enough on my apparitions to just read it and know what it is, and I didn't go digging prior to doing this, but I will be doing my due diligence. So anyway, let's start. Today, I'm pretty sure that this is Our Lady of Nations, but I'm not 100% positive. Today, we have come to the conviction that such complicated situations, which create confusion among the faithful, should always be avoided. This can be accomplished by ensuring a quicker and clearer involvement of this dicastery, and by preventing the impression that the discernment of the process would be directed towards a declaration of supernaturalness, which carries high expectations, anxieties, and even pressures. Instead, as a rule, such declarations of supernaturalist are to be replaced either by a nil obstat, which authorizes positive pastoral work, or by another determination that is suited to this specific situation. The procedures outlined in the new norms, which offer 6 possible final prudential decisions, make it possible to reach a decision in a more reasonable period, helping the bishops manage a situation involving events of alleged supernatural origin before such occurrences, without necessarily ecclesiastical discernment, acquire very problematic dimensions. All of that is Vaticanese for stuff gets weird and culty. And we don't want the Catholic Church to get weird and culty. So we're just gonna stop this from happening. Because as you may have noticed, if you've been following the SSPX excommunications, if you've been following the story, and yes, there is going to be a video coming up about Father Mary with the former apostolate of the Divine Mercy in Texas, who recently got excommunicated for schism. If you've been following the Transalpine Redemptorists, you'll notice that the Vatican really is willing to work with people and try to keep people in up to a certain point. And this is one of the things where the sheer size of the Catholic Church just affects the way things operate, where things can get to a fairly extreme point with a lot of people involved. And then the Catholic Church has to decide if this group is going to be allowed to continue to exist within the church, or is going to have to be told, okay, either reform or leave. And um, that isn't something, and the Catholic Church really doesn't like to kick people out. Which is why you get, groups like Opus Dei that exist within the Catholic Church for decades, um, and can sometimes perpetrate some really ugly abuses before they finally get reined in. So that's what this document is doing, is it's creating that pound of prevention, that ounce of prevention, that means that 10, 20, 50, 100 years down the line, they're not going to need an entire pound of cure to fix it. So let's go. All right. So, um, so we are talking about nevertheless, the possibility always remains that the Holy Father may intervene exceptionally by authorizing procedure that includes the possibility of declaring the supernaturalness of those events. Yet, this is an exception that has been made only rarely in recent centuries. So, this is basically this paragraph is key, because this is saying that bishops can't grant a declaration of supernaturalness anymore. The most a bishop can do is say, people are allowed to believe this. But the Pope now, it's putting the power of declaring something to be supernatural firmly into the hands of the Pope. So the Pope can say, this was supernatural. A bishop can't say this is supernatural. And that's handing the Pope a level of power that the Pope did not previously claim. Now, the reason why I'm pointing this out is that very often traditional Catholics will make the claim that the Pope is giving up too much power, because of synodality, because of the willingness of previous popes to engage in ecumenical dialogue. But this is a case where, in some ways, the popes are listening more, but they're also, in this document, are claiming power that they did not previously have, or did not previously officially have. So now any declaration of supernaturalness is going to have to come directly from the Pope. All right. So at the same time, as stipulated in these new norms, the possibility of declaring an event not supernatural remains, but only when there are objective signs that clearly indicate manipulation at the basis of the phenomena. For example, this might occur when an alleged visionary admits to having lied, or when evidence shows that the blood on a crucifix belongs to the alleged visionary. Which you'll remember with Our Lady of Akita, was one of the things that happened was that the blood that was coming from the statue was submitted for testing by a pathologist. And one of the reasons that was used to support it was the fact that there were multiple blood types detected. Now, does that rule out a naturalistic explanation? Absolutely not. There's always the possibility of contamination when collecting biological specimens. But this, again, was shows how the thinking proceeds, right? Um, so now, okay, recognizing an action of the Holy Spirit. So, why do we need this? What does it do? Most of the shrines that today are privileged places of popular piety for the people of God have never had an official declaration of the supernatural nature of the events that led to the devotion expressed there. Rather, the sensus fidelium, which is Latin for vibes, intuited the activity of the Holy Spirit, and no major problems have arisen that required an intervention from the pastors of the church. This is also important because this is saying if you just have a shrine, if you have a shrine in your community, if you have a chapel, and as the Lecantus Institute would perhaps, if they're still watching, if their representative could give us a number. For example, there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of Marian shrines, like just in Bavaria alone. Um, and you have, um, you know, like for example, there is a cancer shrine dedicated to Saint Peregrine that is at Christ the King Church in Arizona, and people after being healed of cancer will occasionally, and these are people who have gotten perfectly normal chemotherapy. They went to a doctor and they did all the thing, but people will go there and they'll light after their treatment is done and they'll light a candle or um one day actually I visited the shrine and saw that somebody had left one of their had left a beanie at the shrine. It's like, thank God I don't need this anymore. That so this is saying that if you just have a shrine and people go there and visit, that's cool. We're not going to fight about that as long as it doesn't get weird. Um, So often the presence of the bishop and priest at certain times, such as during pilgrimages or celebrating certain masses, had served as an implicit acknowledgement that there are no serious objections and that the supernatural experiences have had a positive influence on the lives of the faithful. Nevertheless, a nil obstat allows the pastors of the church to act confidently and promptly to stand among the people of God in welcoming the Holy Spirit's gifts that may emerge in the midst of these events. The phrase in the midst of, used in the new norms, clarifies that even if the event itself is declared not to be of supernatural origin, there is still a recognition of the signs of the Holy Spirit's supernatural action in the midst of what is occurring. And that is the kind of hair splitting that is being used at Medjugorje. So people are not being encouraged to believe in the messages that the seers had at Medjugorje. They're being encouraged to view it as just the Virgin Mary showed up. So this is a place where the Virgin Mary showed up, and I'm going to go there and feel close to the Virgin Mary. Okay. So back to the document. Um, However, in some cases, along this recognition of the signs of the Holy Spirit's action, there is a need for certain clarifications or purifications. It may happen that the Holy Spirit's action in a specific situation, which can be rightly appreciated, might appear to be mixed with purely human elements, such as personal desires, memories, and sometimes obsessive thoughts, or with, quote, some error of a natural order, not due to bad intentions, but due to the subjective perception of the phenomena. After all, an experience alleged to be a vision cannot simply compel one to either accept as accurate in every detail or to reject it altogether as human or diabolical illusion or fraud. The involvement and accompaniment of the dicastery. It is important to understand that the new norms clarify a significant point about the competence of this dicastery. On the one hand, they affirm that the discernment in this area remains the task of the diocesan bishop. On the other hand, recognizing that now more than ever, these phenomena may involve many people from various dioceses and may spread rapidly across different regions and even different countries. And, for example, you know, uh, to pick on an example that's at top of mind for me right now, Joe Schmid announced that he is converting on the basis of miracles. And now, it is all over Catholic apologist YouTube, all over skeptical, atheist, agnostic YouTube, all over philosophical YouTube, right? People all over the world are talking about this issue. And that's the same kind of thing that happens with miracles. I'm sure if our friends at the Lecantus Institute were to have one of their members go to one of those Bavarian Mary shrines and have and had a vision of the Blessed Virgin Mary, there would be some traditional Catholic going to check it out within a couple of days, because that's just how these things work. So, when and yes, I am partly teasing my friends who are affiliated with this non-existent institute, or rather not yet existent institute. But the point is that, again, we're talking about situations where a bishop only has authority in his boundaries, which means that when you have people coming in from other dioceses, it gets messy. Okay. Uh, and spread rapidly. Okay. The new norms establish that dicastery must always be consulted and given final approval to what the bishop decides before he announces a determination on an event of alleged supernatural origin. Well, previously the dicastery has intervened, but the bishop was asked not to mention it. Today, the dicastery openly manifests its involvement and accompanies the bishop in reaching a final determination. Now, when the bishop makes his decision public, it will be stated as in agreement with the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. This is big. This means that this, handshake, well, we got verbal permission thing is not going to fly. So this is creating a situation where approval for visions is coming from the bishop in consultation with the dicastery, and if it's going to be declared supernatural as opposed to just approved, the bishop is going to be, that's not coming from the bishop, that's coming from the pope. So let's keep going. Okay. At the same time, as already envisioned in the 1978 norms, the new norms also indicate that in some instances, the dicastery may intervene motu proprio, that is, on their own authority. Once a clear determination is made, the new norms specify that the dicastery, in any case, reserves the right to intervene again depending on the development of the phenomena in question, and requests that the bishop continue to watch over the phenomena for the good of the faithful. So again, this is asserting a higher level of Vatican control over these issues than had previously been claimed, which again, this is an illustration of the way that the Catholic Church in the 21st century is not so much giving up papal authority as it is redefining papal authority. So, God is always present in human history and never stops bestowing his gifts of grace upon the world. His gifts of grace upon us through the workings of the Holy Spirit, daily renewing our faith in Jesus Christ, Savior of the world. It is the responsibility of pastors of the church to keep their faithful always attentive as this loving presence of the most holy Trinity in our midst, as it is also their duty to protect the faithful from all deception. These new norms are but one way in which the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith places itself at the service of the pastors of the church in docile listening to the Spirit at work in the faithful people of God. Victor Manuel Cardinal Fernandez, prefect. Okay, so that was the prefatory thing. That was Cardinal Fernandez laying out his logic, showing his work, explaining why this is necessary, explaining why what's going on. And that and this showing the work is going to continue in the introduction, which is basically explaining why, even though we're past the point, even though public revelation, the things that are understood to be meant for all people at all times and all places in human history, why those things are still happening. That's what is being explained in these first 5 paragraphs. So I'm just going to pick up with paragraph 6. Nevertheless, occasionally phenomena occur that seem to exceed the bounds of ordinary experiences and present themselves as having a supernatural origin, such as alleged apparitions. Now, I'm going to be explaining these terms because these are actually technical terms. An apparition is when the Virgin Mary appears. So you're walking down the street and, oh, you see lights, shape, sound, there's a person. That's an apparition. Sorry, that's an apparition. A vision is when the person in their mind, like in like a more imaginative state, like I don't, like they'll say, I don't think that if someone else had been in the room with me that they would have seen the same thing, but I had this experience. Interior or exterior locutions. An interior locution is when you hear the voice in your head. An exterior locution is when the apparition is speaking to you in the same way that if somebody were to walk in this room and start talking to me, I would be talking to them back. And you would just have to trust and believe that the door was open and a human was standing there. Writings or messages. And again, that a writing or a message is when the person doesn't just hear something, but they're told something that they're asked to pass on. Phenomena related to religious images, that would be like weeping statues, blood coming from statues, those kinds of things. And psychophysical phenomena. Psychophysical phenomena would be something like stigmata. Speaking accurately about such occurrences can surpass the capabilities of human language. With the advent of modern means of communication, these phenomena can attract the attention of many believers or cause confusion among them. Since news of these events can spread very quickly, pastors of the church are responsible for handling these phenomena with care by recognizing their fruits, purifying them of negative elements, or warning the faithful about potential dangers arising from them. Moreover, with the development of modern means of communication and the increase in pilgrimages, these phenomena are taking on national, even global proportions, meaning that a decision made in one diocese has consequences elsewhere. Um, this is one where, Fatima, Medjugorje, all of these are examples. And yeah, pilgrimage has always been huge in the Catholic Church, and the relative ease of travel in the 21st century has um, caused that to pick up even more, which is definitely one of those things that um, that causes I'm sorry, I was distracted by what I thought was a comment and it wasn't. Um, okay. Sorry, I'm getting back into the live chat. Okay. So where we go. Okay. So yeah, pilgrimage is, with the increased availability of, air travel, pilgrimage is continuing to be a big business in the Catholic Church. When spiritual experiences are accompanied by physical and psychological phenomena that cannot be immediately explained by reason alone, the church has the delicate responsibility of studying and discerning these occurrences carefully. Because again, weird stuff happens. And sometimes there's an easy explanation for the weird stuff, and sometimes there's just not. But there's also always the possibility of discerning multiple meanings from the same phenomena, right? So, for example, after the when the original Pachamama incident happened in Rome, and the statues that had been placed on the Pachamama altar of pregnant women were taken and thrown into the Tiber, which was seen as a sign of gross disrespect. There was a torrential rainstorm and flooding. Now, people who believe that a ritual to honor Mother Earth might be something appropriate for Catholics to do, and were upset about the fact that disrespect had been shown to Pachamama and that disrespect had been shown to Pope Francis, who is, after all, the Bishop of Rome, that um, that this flooding might be a sign of, well, you disrespect the earth by calling, respect shown to Pachamama idolatry, you get a flood. People who believed that this ritual for Pachamama was idolatry said that God was punishing Pope Francis for apologizing. The same phenomena, the same events, two radically different interpretations. And from a scholarly point of view, there's no way to make any determination about what's right. But it does point out that, when they are talking about um, the fact that multiple meanings can be attached to the same thing, that's a fact. In his apostolic exhortation, Gaudete ex exulte, Pope Francis reminds us that the only way to know whether something comes from the Holy Spirit is through discernment, which must be sought and cultivated in prayer. This is a divine gift that aids the church pastors in fulfilling what St. Paul says: test everything, hold fast to what is good. To assist diocesan bishops and episcopal conferences in discerning phenomena of alleged supernatural origin, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith promulgates the following norms for proceeding in the discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena. Um, and again, when Francis is saying you got to go with prayer, he's not saying, dudes, this is just going to be vibes based from here on out. What he's saying is that sometimes it's like, okay, even talking about medical miracles, right? Somebody is diagnosed with incurable cancer, and then they spontaneously go into remission. Well, spontaneous remission is something that happens. And there's generally, and how do you prove that this was natural spontaneous remission versus supernatural spontaneous remission? You can't. All you can do is just go with the balance of probability. And this document is acknowledging that ultimately this is about faith and this is about balance of probability. It's not about using miracles to create certainty. So let's continue in paragraph 10. By following the norms below, the church will be able to fulfill its duty in discerning if A, whether the signs of divine action can be ascertained in phenomena that are alleged to be of supernatural origin, B, whether there's anything that conflicts with faith and morals in the writings or messages of those involved in the alleged phenomena in question, C, whether it is permissible to appreciate their spiritual fruits, whether they need to be purified from problematic elements, or whether the faithful should be warned about potential risks, D, whether it is advisable for competent ecclesiastical authority to realize their pastoral value. 11. Well, the following provisions foresee the possibility of a discernment in the sense described in paragraph 10. It must be noted that, as a general rule, it is not foreseen that in these norms that ecclesiastical authority would give a positive recognition of divine origin of alleged supernatural phenomena. 12. Whenever a nil obstat is granted by the dicastery, again, granted by the dicastery, see part 17 below, so we'll wait for part 17. Such phenomena do not become objects of faith, which means that the faithful are not obliged to give an assent of faith to them. Rather, as in the case of charisms recognized by the church, they are ways to deepen one's knowledge in Christ and give of oneself more generously to him, while rooting oneself more and more deeply in communion with the entire Christian people. So 13, even when a nil obstat is granted for canonization processes, This does not imply a declaration of authenticity regarding any supernatural phenomena present in a person's life. For example, the decree of canonization for Saint Gemma Galgani, Pius XI, um, and I'm not going to attempt to butcher the Latin, but what this is referring to is the fact that there were alleged miraculous incidents that happened with Saint Gemma Galgani that ultimately could not be proven, but there was enough about her life, and there were miracles that were documented after her death that caused the Pope to go ahead and canonize her anyway. And I'll be getting in, and don't worry, we'll be getting to Gemma eventually. There's a lot of saints, but we're just going to keep going until we run out of saints and until we run out of things in the Catholic Church to talk about. Um, so at the same time, it should be acknowledged that such phenomena, which could have supernatural origin, at times appear connected to confused human appearances, theologically inaccurate expressions, or interests that are not entirely legitimate. And again, we can point to several things that this could be, including the way that, for example, Medjugorje was used by Croat nationalists during, in the wars that happened by when Yugoslavia fell apart. The discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena is carried out from the start by the diocesan bishop or by another ecclesiastical authority mentioned in part 2 in dialogue with the dicastery. However, since special attention to the common good of the entire people of God can never be lacking, the dicastery reserves the right to evaluate the moral and doctrinal elements of the spiritual experiences and the use that is being made of it. It is important not to overlook that sometimes the discernment may also deal with problems such as delicts, manipulation, and damage to the unity of the church, undue financial gain, and serious doctrinal errors that could cause scandal and undermine the credibility of the church. And a good example of this is actually what's going on in Texas with the Divine Mercy Apostolate, where Sister Mary Ampola was alleging that she's been having visions and locutions of the Virgin Mary, in which the Virgin Mary is telling her that Pope Francis and Pope Leo are not legitimate popes, which was one of the things that resulted in, I apologize for the shaky cam, in the priest who's the head of the Divine Mercy Apostolate being excommunicated for schism, and Catholics being told by the bishop not to go to the Divine Mercy Apostolate anymore. I'm talking about the retreat center in Texas, not the organization affiliated with Father Alar. So, okay, so now we have section B, conclusions. The discernment of alleged supernatural phenomena may reach conclusions that are usually expressed in one of the terms listed below. 17. Okay, so so we've been talking about the 6 conclusions that you can come to. So this is top tier, right? So we have top tier, We are looking at nil obstat. Without expressing any certainty about the supernatural authenticity of the phenomena itself, many times, many signs of the action of the Holy Spirit are acknowledged in the midst of a given spiritual experience, and no aspects that are particularly critical or risky have been detected, at least so far. For this reason, the diocesan bishop is encouraged to appreciate the pastoral value of this spiritual proposal and even promote its spread, including possibly through pilgrimages to a sacred site. So, I don't know, chat, since there are four of you in the chat, chat, do you think that when I talk about Marian apparitions, I should invoke Nerd Church's Sensus Fidelium and give it the Nerd Church declaration of where it fits on this level of six? So should we have a Nerd Church nil obstat for certain events? Let me know in the chat or in the comments. Okay. So then we have so we've got nil obstat, and then we have prae oculus habetor. Although important positive signs are recognized, some aspects of confusion or potential risks are also perceived that require the diocesan bishop to engage in careful discernment and dialogue with the recipients of a given supernatural experience. If these were writings or messages, doctrinal clarification might be necessary. So this would be something like if someone said, well, I had a vision and the Virgin Mary came to me and said that people should pray the rosary and that um, Mary would like to have the title Mother of the Savior. The person might be asked, well, what do you think that title Mother of the Savior means? Because what that person might answer is, well, I think it means that, Mary is the semi-incarnation of God the Father. In which case the bishop is going to go, that's not what that means. And if you start saying what that means, and if you are saying that Mary says that what that means, then we don't think that that's Mary. This is an example. Hi, Tuco. That was an example. That's not something that anybody has ever said. That's not something that I'm claiming. That was a fictional example that I made up on the fly for the sake of fiction. Thank you. I'd occasionally say hi to Cardinal Fernandez in case, things are getting a little too spicy, because I do think that eventually the day is going to come where the DDF starts paying official attention to Catholic podcasts. So let's continue. Okay. So now now we're at the third level. This is mid tier. Curator. While various or significant critical elements are noted, at the same time, the phenomena has already spread widely and there are verifiable spiritual fruits connected to it. Spiritual fruits are things like an increase in vocations, just people coming to church more, people showing up on people showing up to mass more often, people going on pilgrimages, people praying more. Those are all spiritual fruits. In this situation, a ban that could upset the people of God is not recommended. Nevertheless, the diocesan bishop is asked not to encourage this phenomena, but to seek out alternative expressions of devotion and possibly reorient its spiritual and pastoral aspects. And then we come down to number 4, submandato. In this category, the critical issues are not connected to the phenomena itself, which is rich in positive elements, but a person, a family, or a group of people who are misusing it. For example, the spiritual experience may be exploited for particular and undue financial gain, committing immoral acts, or carrying out a pastoral activity apart from the one already present in the ecclesiastical territory without accepting the instructions of the diocesan bishop. In this situation, the pastoral leadership of the specific place where the phenomena is occurring is entrusted to the diocesan bishop or another person delegated by the Holy See, who, if unable to intervene directly, will try to reach a reasonable agreement. That is a whole bunch of delicate and kind words and Vaticanese for sometimes the situation gets weird and culty, and it becomes a cult of personality around the visionary and it becomes about the vision and the visionary rather than being about the church. And it's basically it's somebody who's claiming authority because they are a visionary. And that is becoming a problem because people are listening to them and not listening to their priest and not listening to their bishop. In short, the visionary has become an influencer. Again, this is since a parallel situation already exists on Catholic YouTube. This is why I think that eventually the church is going to be having to pay more attention to Catholic YouTube. All right. So now we have the next one, Probierter et abstruator. While there are legitimate requests and some positive elements, critical issues and risks associated with the phenomena appear to be very serious. Therefore, to prevent future confusion or even scandal that could erode the faith of ordinary people, the dicastery asks the diocesan bishop to declare publicly that adherence to this phenomena is not allowed. So this is the level that, say, the visions of Sister Mary Ampola are at, right? At the same time, the diocesan bishop is asked to offer catechesis that can help the faithful understand the reasons for the decision and reorient the legitimate spiritual concerns of that part of the people of God. So this is saying, okay, if you've got a problem, you've got to sit on that problem. The bishop has the authority to sit on that problem, but at the same time, the fact that there is a problem means that people are going to be that people have a need that wasn't being addressed before that you need to address. Okay, and then we have Declaratio de non supernaturale. In this situation, the dicastery authorizes the diocesan bishop to declare that the phenomena is found not to be not supernatural. This decision must be based on faith, on facts and evidence that are concrete and proven. For instance, if an alleged visionary admits to having lied, or if credible witnesses provide elements of proof that allow one to discover the phenomena was based on fabrication, an erroneous intention, or mythomania. In light of the aforementioned points, it is affirmed, as a rule, neither the diocesan bishops, nor the episcopal conferences, nor the dicastery will declare that these phenomena are of a supernatural origin, even if a nil obstat is granted. It remains true, however, that the Holy Father can authorize a special procedure in this regard. So again, we're giving more power to the Pope. All right. So the bishop is now being advised on how to proceed. Before we get into this, um, I am going to have to beg your very kind indulgence because I am a Catholic woman, and that means I have had babies. And that means that sometimes I need to run to the restroom. So I am going to just pop on one of my favorite hymns, which will hopefully not get me a copyright strike. And I am going to run to the restroom. This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, I will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made, and be glad in it. This is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. This is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, I will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. Lord has made, and be glad in it. This is the day, this is the day that the Lord. This is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. This is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. That is not one of my favorite renditions of that hymn, and I see I actually managed to scare one of you away. Um, and I apologize for that. Okay, but I am back. It is safe. Okay, so now um, we are going to um, so now we're talking about specifically these are the rules, these are the procedures that bishops are expected to follow, and for the most part these are the which means these are the procedures that when somebody shows up and says the Virgin Mary showed up in my room and she told me that everybody needs to pray the rosary and donate 10% of their income and donate 10% of their income to charities that are aimed at feeding the poor. This is how the bishop is supposed to proceed. What do you do when somebody in your community, sorry, I realized I need to plug my phone in. If I want to be able to continue to keep an eye on the chat, what is the bishop supposed to do? So it is the responsibility of the diocesan bishop in dialogue with the National Episcopal Conference to examine cases of alleged supernatural phenomena which occur within his territory and to formulate a final judgment on them, including the possible promotion of an associated veneration or devotion. Veneration is key here because a veneration in this case would include, say, for example, if there was an extraordinarily holy person who lived in a community and people start, and this is someone that people think this person was a saint. And there start being miracles associated with their tomb. An example of this would be in the Diocese of Denver. Um, Ve- um, Venerable Julia Greeley has had her remains moved into a beautiful marble tomb. Um, and um, Now people are being encouraged to pray for her intercession. And should miracles start occurring, then that would be part of veneration to her as a saint. Or devotion would be something like if there was a Marian apparition and people are um, coming, and it's now you have, Our Lady of, well, like Our Lady of Guadalupe, for example. That was a devotion that started with a Marian apparition. Um, Guadalupe just gets permanent nil obstat status from Nerd Church. Um, I'm sorry. Um, 2/3 of the Nerd Church crew. Oh, okay. So people are saying that yes, I will do a tier list. So yes, but yeah, Guadalupe is forever nil obstat from Nerd Church. 2/3 of the Nerd Church crew live in areas where if we spoke out against devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, people would throw rocks at us walking down the street if word got around. And also, frankly, Our Lady of Guadalupe is just based top tier imagery. The historicity of Our Lady of Guadalupe is something that I'm willing to discuss, but I do think that there is room to have a critically maximalist approach and assume that there probably was some kind of an apparition. Um, but but this is still an area where I'm continuing to do research and where I'm willing to have my mind changed. Nonetheless, Guadalupe will never not be nil obstat. That's just how it is. Um, okay. So, um, so what's going on? Okay. After having the judgment of the bishop is to be submitted to the dicastery for approval. Article 2. After having investigated the events in question in according to the following norms, it is the responsibility of the diocesan bishop to transmit the results of the investigation with his votum, that's his vote, his opinion, to the dicastery of the doctrine for the faith and to intervene according to the indications provided by the dicastery. It is the responsibility of the dicastery to evaluate the diocesan bishop's way of proceeding and to approve or not approve the determination that the bishop proposes to attribute to the specific case. Again, that's just boilerplate. This is how the bureaucracy part is going to run. But again, this is significant in the history of the Catholic Church that the rules are being published in black and white and not just being kept private so that the bishop knows what's going on and the people sitting in the pews don't. At this point, everybody has access to this information courtesy of Vatican.va. Yes, the Catholic Church has its own, the Catholic Church, by having .va, we have our own internet domain. Yes, Catholics can be smug about that too. Um, okay. Um, all right. So, Article 3. The diocesan bishop is to refrain from making any public statement in favor of the authenticity or supernatural nature of such phenomena and from having any personal connection with them. Yet he must remain vigilant and, if necessary, intervene with swiftness and prudence according to the procedures indicated in the following norms. If the forms of devotion emerge in connection with the alleged supernatural event, even without true and proper veneration, the diocesan bishop has the serious obligation of initiating comprehensive canonical investigation as soon as possible to safeguard the faith and prevent abuses. This is also important because this means that the bishop can't say, I was just sitting back and waiting. I was waiting to see what the fruits were. This is saying that if people are showing up at a church because of some vision, some apparition, some supernatural thing, the bishop has a positive duty to get involved. The diocesan bishop should exercise particular care, even using the means at his own disposal to prevent the spread of confused religious manifestations or the dissemination of any materials pertaining to the alleged supernatural phenomena, such as the weeping of sacred images, the sweating, bleeding, or mutation of consecrated hosts, to avoid fueling a sensationalistic climate. Because, yeah, like, I mean, I have to admit, like, if somebody in my town reported there was a host that looks like it is actual physical human flesh, or it looks like it has a spot of blood on it, or if there's a bleeding statue, I'm going to want to go see that. Just, and yeah, part of it is just curiosity, and part of that is the fact that I just think that would be cool. I mean, as I often say, who among us would not like to have wizard powers? And at the same time, the fact that this is going to attract just a lot of just curiosity means that the bishop has a duty to intervene, and they can't just say, nope, not my problem. Which, again, we're looking at this case in Texas where the Apostolate of Divine Mercy started publishing their visions in 2024. But Sister Mary Ampola had reported starting having these visions in 2016. And there was word starting to get out about them before it was published. Perhaps had the bishop intervened sooner, this argument would run. Maybe, it wouldn't have gotten to the point that people need to be excommunicated. On the other hand, it's noteworthy that these messages started being published only 2 years ago. And in 2 years, this group has been told either stop with the schism talk or get excommunicated. And it didn't take decades, it took 2 years. So let's continue. Okay. When the alleged phenomena involves the competence of multiple diocesan bishops due to the domicile of the individuals involved or the spread of the forms of veneration or popular devotion associated with the phenomena, those diocesan bishops, in consultation with the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, can establish an interdiocesan commission. This commission, provided over by one of the diocesan bishops, will provide the investigation in accordance with the following articles. For this purpose, they might also seek the assistance of relevant offices of the Episcopal Conference. Now, to show you why it is that multiple people from a diocese might be having an issue, be involved in the same thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is the map of Catholic dioceses in the United States. Okay. So you'll notice that, for example, over here, oh, this is, oh, no, that's an old map. That was before Las Vegas, because now Las Vegas is a separate, oh, yeah, because now Las Vegas is a separate, no, that is a good map. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is a current map. Okay. So you can see, for example, that you have the Archdiocese of Santa Fe includes, you've got Phoenix is here, Tucson is here. So it would be very easy to have a phenomena that involves the archdiocese that is going on in Tucson that is pulling people in from Santa Fe and from Tucson really rapidly. So that's why it's an issue. And in Europe, the dioceses can be even smaller. Okay. So, and then we have the same thing here in Article 5. Um, okay. So, and then it's just sort of talking about who has what to do. Okay. So now we are down to the investigatory phase. So this is how the bishop is supposed to carry out the investigation. Whenever the diocesan bishop receives a report which has at least the semblance of truth about the events of an alleged supernatural origin pertaining to the Catholic faith and occurring within the territory of his competence, he shall prudently inform himself about the events and circumstances, either personally or through a delegate. He should also promptly gather all the elements useful for an initial assessment. So this would be something like um, somebody is somebody is putting the host in the tabernacle and they notice that one of the hosts has a red spot on it. Is it mold? Is it blood? They report it to the priest reports it to the bishop sends it out to a pathology lab to see what it is. And then it goes on up. If and then so we're now at 2. If the phenomenon in question can be easily managed within the scope of those directly involved, and if no danger to the community is received, the diocesan bishop, after consulting with the dicastery, shall take no further action, although the duty of vigilance remains. So this would be like, for example, if somebody says, oh, somebody criticized me for using Bing as a search engine. Yeah, I don't know. That was just the one that popped up. Um, I'm always somehow getting my web browser set to something wrong. Um, but anyway, so point two would be something like, say somebody goes to their priest and says that, okay, random example. Carlo Acutis came to me and told me that I should, I don't know, pray the rosary daily for the next 2 weeks and go to daily mass, and that if I do this, my dead grandma will get out of purgatory, right? Um, and the priest might, talk to the person, whatever, um, and they might mention it to the bishop over lunch, and the bishop is going to say, does this person seem inclined to, publicize this, be in any way a danger to themselves or others? And this person is, and the priest might say, well, no, they don't really want this to be a big deal, but they have a devotion to Carlo, and they're really glad that their dead grandma isn't in purgatory anymore. And the bishop will say, cool, sounds good to me, keep going. So it could just stop there. And sometimes it does. Okay. So, um, if the persons involved are dependent on different diocesan bishops, the opinions of these bishops should be heard. When an alleged phenomena originates in one place and further development involves further developments in other locations, it may be evaluated differently in those locations. So this would be like if somebody, say, has a vision where, well, let's stick with Carlo, right? Where somebody shows up and, or somebody has a vision where they said, Carlo told me to pray the rosary and go to daily mass for 2 weeks, and I would be giving great graces. And then somebody else in another diocese hears about that, reports the same vision, except that person is saying, mail me $20 and I will pray and go to daily mass on your dead grandma's behalf. Um, the one person who is just acting on a vision in response to their own personal dead grandma might not be a problem. The person asking for $20 so that they can pray for your dead grandma on your behalf, that person is a problem and is a grifter. However, if somebody wants to give me 20, no, I'm sorry, I'm not even gonna joke about that. Um, so going down to 4 for the rules of discernment. When the alleged phenomena involves various types of objects, the diocesan bishops, personally or through a delegate, may order that the objects be stored in a safe and secure place pending clarification of the case. When it involves an alleged Eucharistic miracle, the consecrated species must be kept in a confidential place and in an appropriate manner. If the gathered elements seem sufficient, the diocesan bishop shall decide whether to initiate a phase of evaluating the phenomena, to propose to the dicastery in his votum a final judgment for the greater good of the faith of the church, and in order to safeguard and promote the spiritual welfare of the faithful. The diocesan bishop shall constitute an investigatory commission, among whose members there is to be at least one theologian, one canonist, and one expert chosen based on the nature of the phenomena. So the person chosen on the basis of the phenomena does not necessarily have to be a Catholic. So, for example, if there was, say, a case of demonic possession. And or no, no, not demonic possession. That'll muddy the water. Okay. If somebody said to them, I had a vision of the Virgin Mary, and the Virgin Mary was speaking to me in Aramaic, and this is what she said. And they proceed to write something down phonetically in Aramaic. The excuse me. The diocese might call in a linguistics professor, um, or a Hebrew Bible scholar who's not even Catholic, but they know Aramaic, and they can tell you whether this is glossolalia or whether this is actual Aramaic being spoken by, one would presume, if the person doing the talking isn't an Aramaic speaker, might be the words of the Virgin Mary. So yeah, the purpose of this commission is not only to reach a statement regarding the truthfulness of the occurrences in question, but also to carry out a detailed examination of every aspect of the event, with the goal of providing the diocesan bishop with every element that could be useful for an evaluation. The members of the investigatory committee shall be of unquestionable reputation, sure faith, certain doctrine, and proven prudence. They shall have no direct or indirect involvement with the persons or events that are being discerned. So again, this is a fairly responsible and fairly reasonable way of proceeding. We're setting up a 3-person panel, two church representatives. One person may or may not be Catholic, but will be a relevant subject matter expert. Yes, somebody said that they thought it was justified to ask YouTube to give me money. Yeah, if you want to subscribe to my Patreon, which is under Katie Writes Poetry, and read my shitty poetry, which I occasionally post, go ahead. Otherwise, I don't know, DM me, and I send a email to Nerd Church Official, and I will be glad to put you in contact with my PayPal. But no, seriously, don't. Um, so so anyway, we've got our committee, they're doing the investigation, and they can't be somebody who is involved in the case. And then the bishop appoints a delegate, either from the commission or not in the commission. The diocesan bishop or his delegate shall also appoint a notary to attend the meetings and record the minutes of the witness examinations and of any other official act by the commission. Paperwork. The Catholic Church runs on paperwork, and that is a beautiful thing, because these reports are invaluable to scholars and historians who have to go back and try to reconstruct what the crud was going on. So the notary is responsible for ensuring the minutes are duly signed and all the facts of the investigatory phase are collected, well ordered, and stored in the archives of the diocesan curia. The notary will also provide for the convocation of the commission and preparation of its documents. All members of the commission are sworn to secrecy. Um, okay. These, and then the sworn, okay. Um, the sworn depositions of the persons involved in the alleged supernatural occurrences are to be given in the presence of the entire commission or at least some of its members. When the facts of the case are based on eyewitness testimony, witnesses are to be examined as soon as possible to benefit from temporal proximity to the event. Again, that's pretty standard in any investigation. Everybody knows human memory is fallible. You want to get a hold of those witnesses before they can start to have their recollection contaminated. Confessors of the persons claiming to be involved in the events of supernatural origin may not testify about any manners they have learned about in sacramental confession. Again, this is an indication of how seriously the Catholic Church takes the seal of the confessional. Even if they're pretty sure the person is lying about having the vision, if the person has gone to confession and said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned, I lied my ass off about that vision." Now, their confessor might say, "I want you to go and say you lied," but the confessor cannot be questioned. Spiritual directors of the persons claiming to be involved in the supernatural events may not testify about any of the matters they have learned in spiritual direction unless the persons involved authorize the depositions in writing. Again, a spiritual director is someone, it's usually the person's confessor, it doesn't have to be, but it's basically somebody says, "I think I saw something. I think I had a vision." And they'll go to a priest and they'll do, like, periodic meetings, periodic check-ins to just kind of make sure that the person is, dealing with the phenomenon well. And so that there's basically a paper trail if things start to escalate, or if the person, who just, had Carlos shut up and told me, "Pray for your dead grandma." And now I want to say that everybody should pray for their dead grandma. Well, since this is a get grandma out of purgatory free card, this is going to require some investigation. And the person may have talked to their spiritual director about some really sensitive, really personal stuff, in addition to the stuff relating to the vision. So, um, again, this is respecting the visionary, right? So now we've got Article 10. If the materials under investigation include written texts or other elements, video, audio, or photographic, disclosed through the media and authored by a person involved in the phenomena, these materials should be subjected to a careful examination by experts. The notary is to include the examination. If the extraordinary events referred to in Article 7 involve different types of objects, the Commission are to undertake a thorough investigation of those objects using the experts on the Commission or other experts identified for the case. An example of this was like Our Lady of Akita. There was an effort made to collect the red liquid that appeared to be blood, and then it was sent to a pathologist who examined it to determine if it was blood and the blood type of the blood to to see, okay, who could this blood have come from. And as it turned out, it wasn't the same blood type as Sister Agnes. Not to say that it couldn't have been blood from someone else, but because again, cross contamination, always a possibility, but it wasn't Agnes. um If the extraordinary event involves any findings of an organic nature oh, okay, that require special laboratory and, in any case, technical scientific investigation, the Commission will entrust the study of those elements to genuine experts in the relevant areas of investigation. If the phenomenon involves the body and blood of the Lord in the sacramental signs of bread and wine, special care should be given so that any analysis of the Eucharistic species do not result in disrespect to the Blessed Sacrament, ensuring due reverence for it is maintained. That means that when your host is taken in for testing to see if that red spot is blood or mold, that the host itself has to be dealt with as though it be in a religiously sensitive way, because it's still a consecrated host even after it's been subjected to testing. If the alleged extraordinary event gives rise to problems of public order, the diocesan bishop shall cooperate with the competent civil authority. Okay. So, and then to close out the investigation phase, if the alleged supernatural events continue the investigation and the situation suggests prudential matters, the diocesan bishop shall not hesitate to enforce those acts of good governance to avoid uncontrolled or dubious displays of devotion or the beginnings of veneration based on elements that are not as yet verified. Okay, I've been going for about 2 hours at this point. As I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I'm not feeling well today. So at this point, I am just going to close it out and wish everyone a very good night. And I hope that you will tune in at 3:30 on Thursday when RJ will be visiting, and we will be talking about Joe Schmid's um, conversion to Catholicism. So I wish you all a very lovely and good night. And of course, the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time is also coming up on Sunday. So goodbye.